Soldiers all killed! And was behind...
Battlefield 1 is a first-person shooter developed by EA, DICE, and published by Electronic Arts. The game is in the setting of World War I and includes weapons and vehicles from World War I. There are many different game modes to fit the player's preferences. The player can choose between classes such as Assault, Support, Scout, or Medic. Each class is necessary for having a fluid team. The horrors and heroism of the Great War are well told in War Stories, Battlefield 1's campaign. During the campaign, you are exposed to a variety of perspectives from the characters you play, each with their own motive. The vehicular sections of War Stories introduce you to the first generation of tanks and fighter aircraft that were advanced warfare of their time. Battlefield 1's multiplayer stays consistent to the series' roots of open space combat, but now introduces weapons from World War I, vehicles from World War I, and the terrain of World War I. One of Battlefield 1's most popular multiplayer game modes, Operations, includes one side pushing forward while the other holds them back in conflicts that can last up to an hour. Operations also offers a surprising amount of historical context due to the informative voiceovers that are included. For example, one operation known as Kaiserslaut not only educates players on the 1918 Spring Offensive, but it also hypothesizes what could have happened if the Germans had won. Overall, Battlefield 1 provides a historical context of World War I and also offers an exhilarating experience while playing either campaign or multiplayer. My interpretation of the campaign of Battlefield 1 is that the creators of the game wanted the campaign to stay interesting by implementing 6 different soldiers that players have the option to choose from. I personally believe that the creators of Battlefield 1 chose the setting of the game to be in World War I because this emphasizes the old school style of the game. The old school style of Battlefield 1 makes it unique compared to other first-person shooters developed around the same time. These other first-person shooter games that were being developed focus on a more futuristic game style, while Battlefield 1 was based around a historical event. One of the most influencing aspects of the game is that it is one of the most realistic first-person shooter games available. The immersive production values greatly amplify the sights and sounds that have previously existed in other war shooter games. Some examples include the sound of empty shells dropping on the metal floor of a tank and the distant sound of an explosion from far away. I think that EA and DICE are trying to give the player a virtual reality of World War I and to show how the lives of the soldiers changed throughout the war stories. With Battlefield 1, EA and DICE have proven the viability of World War I as a time period worth revisiting in first-person shooters. It brings focus into countries and nationalities that do not exist today, while also shedding light on how the outcome of the war has shaped our lives today. There are many pros and cons to Battlefield 1. Let's start off with the pros. World War I weapons put a fun twist on the game. The vehicles have many loadouts to add variety and option. The game's graphics look incredible, even on low settings. Now onto some cons of the game. First off, armored vehicles are overpowered because they are almost impenetrable to bullets. In the game modes Operation and Rush, there are maps that are unbalanced, like Monte Grappa. This map is unbalanced because one team is always going to have the high ground over the other team. Medics can revive too easily and too fast. Mortars are unbalanced because they are able to be used infinitely, which means they will not run out of ammo. There are some small glitches that make the game seem less professionally developed. For example, one small glitch that makes the game seem less professional is a horse sticking halfway through a window, as you can see here. Overall, I would rate Battlefield 1 as a 9 out of 10. Battlefield 1 includes stunning graphics, exhilarating gameplay from either campaign or multiplayer, and the realism of World War I. The only reason this game does not deserve a 10 out of 10 is because of the small amount of cons that affect some aspects of gameplay.
Battlefield 1 is a first-person shooter that was developed by EA and DICE, and it was published by Electronic Arts. The game takes place in 1914 to 1918 during the Great War period. Battlefield 1 is available for the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4, and the PC. In Battlefield 1, you can participate in historic battles that are all around the world. There is a campaign mode and a multiplayer mode. each having decent-sized atmospheres so the player could run around freely and do whatever he wants. Battlefield 1 has stunning graphics and stunning little details to objects, which makes the game great. Some examples of the details in the game is that if you lay down in the mud, your weapon will become muddy, and if you shoot a light bulb out, the light bulb will break. These details add realism to the game. Unlike most video games, Battlefield 1 has a 64 vs 64 player multiplayer mode. Although the game has stunning graphics, the game is also historically inaccurate for several different reasons. A couple reasons why the game is historically inaccurate is because most of the weapons in the game are prototypes and never saw actual combat. Another reason is that some of the vehicles used were never in World War I, and the reliability of the vehicles was staggering. But after all, it's just a video game. Although Battlefield 1 is a fun arcade game, it also has some messages for the player to stumble upon. The campaign mode has many things to offer to make the player more knowledgeable about World War I. The game would set you in battles around the world with objectives that actually took place in World War I. The game can teach players locations around the world and the technology during the war. The game itself has an old school feeling to it when you're playing it. Battlefield 1 could also set an example of the hardships of war during the campaign mode. The huge map size can also take hours to completely explore, which gives the player lots of activities to do, besides killing the enemy. The game is also in the first-person point of view, which added realism to make it seem like you were actually in the battle. EA and DICE wanted to make the game as realistic as possible to make it seem like you're actually there in the game. Personally, I think Battlefield 1 is a work of art, but only in some aspects. I think EA did an amazing job with their graphics, which blew me away. I think the campaign is very entertaining and it had some good, nice stories with it, with fun missions to play, but it got kind of repetitive towards the end of it. I think the multiplayer mode is fun at first glance, fighting with other people, driving vehicles, and exploring the terrain. Although these activities do get boring after continuous playtime, because they get pretty old fast. I feel like the multiplayer mode gets tedious after a while because everybody's just trying to kill you, and after a point, it's kind of like a respawn, die, or it could go the other way around and it could be a fun game for you. I think the campaign mode is very creative with its different war stories, which is when you could play as different soldiers around the world with all different stories, and you could play different objectives, such as one war story you're in a plane and the other you're fighting in a tank around the trenches. One thing I don't like about Battlefield 1 is that the weapons used in the game are all prototypes and weren't actually used during the war, which makes the game historically inaccurate along with several different reasons. In World War I, most of the equipment was very unreliable, but in Battlefield 1, everything works flawlessly. The game could get very interesting sometimes because there are glitches which make the game seem unfinished and broken at times, so say you're driving a car, it would just put you 1,000 feet in the air. One annoying thing in the multiplayer mode is that the weapons are very unbalanced, so you could have an overpowered weapon or you could have a very underpowered weapon and get destroyed by the enemy. I feel like you could only do the campaign once to get the full experience from it, and the multiplayer, after you play it a lot, it feels very repetitive and it might get boring after a while. I do believe that EA and DICE put a lot of effort into this game to make it fun because it is very hard to make a game fun, especially during the World War I time period. And I do think they did a very good job with it.